Keir Starmer took to the stage at the Welsh Labour Party conference with a message of unity and optimism, claiming that Wales has carried the torch for the Labour Party during 14 years in opposition. It was a speech brimming with confidence, designed to solidify his party's support base in a region that has long been a Labour stronghold. For Starmer, this moment was pivotal, a chance to project the image of a leader ready to take Labour's successes in Wales and replicate them across the UK. The only great nation on our islands where we could show as a movement the change that we can deliver for working people, Starmer declared. He lauded Welsh Labour members, pointing to their role in proving that Labour could govern not just competently, but with transformative results.
For 14 years, this nation here has carried the torch for the entire Labour Party, the only great nation on our islands where we could show as a movement the change that we can deliver for working people. But now, a Labour government in Cardiff Bay, joined by a Labour government in Westminster, a new era, a new opportunity, a responsibility that we must now take to return Wales and Britain decisively to the service of working people.
But outside the conference, Starmer's government was facing a barrage of criticism over one of its most contentious policies yet, the inheritance tax on agricultural assets. Farmers across the UK are furious, describing the new tax as a death knell for family farms and a betrayal by a party many of them had reluctantly trusted to bring stability after years of Conservative rule. Labour's Budget 2024 has been nothing short of incendiary. Among its most controversial measures is the introduction of a 20% inheritance tax on agricultural assets worth over £1 million, assets that were previously exempt. For family farms, already struggling with rising costs and market volatility, this new tax is seen as an existential threat. Critics argue it will force farmers to sell off land, jeopardising not only their businesses but the nation's food security. Howard Cox, a prominent Reform UK figure and vocal critic of Labour, didn't mince words. In a statement that has been widely circulated, Cox said, "This government has betrayed our farmers. Their inheritance tax bombshell is driving family-owned farms into financial ruin, while greedy corporations swoop in to buy the land for solar farms and wind turbines." Cox's comments have resonated deeply with rural communities. For decades, family farms have quietly sustained the UK's agricultural economy, balancing the demands of producing affordable food with the pressures of slim profit margins. Now, many farmers feel abandoned by a government they accuse of prioritising urban voters and environmental policies over their survival. Adding fuel to the fire, Labour MPs themselves appear divided. One senior MP reportedly admitted privately, "You got away with this by the skin of your teeth. Farmers and motorists are furious. We can't afford to alienate them both." The confession has only reinforced the perception that Labour's policy decisions are not only ideologically driven, but also poorly thought out and politically reckless. Farmers' groups have taken their protests to the next level, warning of disastrous consequences if the tax is not repealed. The Country Land and Business Association, CLA, has published new research showing that average-sized family farms could face crippling financial burdens under the new policy. A typical 200-acre arable farm, for example, might generate an annual return of just £27,000. Yet, it would face an inheritance tax liability of £430,000, an amount so staggering that some farms would need to sell 20% of their land or allocate 160% of their annual profits just to cover the tax bill. The result? Less land, less investment, and higher food prices for consumers. Farmers argue that this policy doesn't just hurt them, it jeopardizes the entire food supply chain. With farms being forced to sell off productive land, often to large corporations, the UK's ability to produce its own food will diminish. Imports, which are already costly, will increase, further driving up prices for struggling households. John McTernan, a former aide to Tony Blair, only added to the outrage when he dismissed family farming as an industry that Britain could do without. His comments, made during an interview with GB News, have been widely condemned as emblematic of Labour's perceived indifference to rural communities. For farmers, McTernan's statement feels like confirmation of their worst fears, that they are nothing more than collateral damage in Labour's broader ideological agenda. But the damage doesn't stop at inheritance tax. Farmers are also bracing for other fiscal measures that will increase their costs, including higher employer national insurance contributions and carbon taxes. And looming on the horizon is Labour's ambitious environmental agenda, which includes a pledge to reduce emissions by 81% by 2035. While these policies may win applause in metropolitan circles, farmers argue they are unrealistic and economically damaging. The backlash has spilled over into the broader political landscape. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has been criticised for what opponents describe as a lack of foresight in crafting the budget. While her decision to freeze fuel duty until 2026 has been praised as a rare concession to working people, it is overshadowed by the economic havoc many fear her other policies will unleash. Fair Fuel UK, a campaign group that has long fought against excessive taxes on motorists and small businesses, has now joined forces with farmers to oppose the inheritance tax. Howard Cox, who also leads Fair Fuel UK, announced a major protest scheduled for November 19th in Westminster. Cox and his supporters are calling on Labour to abandon what they describe as a dishonest and destructive policy. These policies will not support economic growth, Cox warned. They will advance the decline of our proud agricultural and livestock heritage. Meanwhile, tensions within the Labour Party continue to simmer. Backbenchers are reportedly pressuring Starmer to reconsider the tax, fearing that it will cost the party crucial support in rural constituencies. But reversing course could also alienate Labour's urban base, which largely supports higher taxes on wealthier individuals and businesses. For Starmer, it's a precarious balancing act, one that could define his premiership. As if the inheritance tax debacle weren't enough, Labour is also facing renewed scrutiny over its post-Brexit trade policies. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey has called for a reset in UK-EU relations, arguing that current trade barriers are stifling economic growth. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has hinted at closer ties with Europe, but has ruled out rejoining the single market or customs union. Critics argue that Labour's unwillingness to address the economic fallout of Brexit, combined with its controversial domestic policies, is undermining investor confidence. At the heart of these controversies is a question that Keir Starmer cannot escape. Can he lead a Labour government that unites the country, or will his policies deepen the divides that already exist? His speech at the Welsh Labour Party conference was meant to be a moment of triumph, a reminder of Labour's capacity to govern effectively. Instead, it has been overshadowed by the growing discontent among farmers and rural communities, a discontent that threatens to become a full-blown crisis for his government. For now, Starmer's declaration that Wales has carried the torch for the Labour Party feels less like a rallying cry and more like an empty slogan. As the protests against his government grow louder, the question remains, how long can Labour hold on to that torch before it burns